Retaliation skills are brand new abilities being added to the game in patch 3.25, and they're replacing the old counterattacks. The mechanics for retaliation skills are interesting, so let's take a look at that first. By default, retaliation skills cannot be used. For them to become usable, you need to meet a specified condition, such as blocking a hit or taking a savage hit. Once usable, the skill can be used once, and you have a default window of 2 seconds to do so. Once used, the retaliation skill will go on a short cooldown. The quality stat for all retaliation skills is cooldown recovery rate. All of the retaliation skills have really good numbers due to their mechanics. Let's take a look at them, beginning with Crushing Fist. So this is a slam skill, and unlike other melee retaliation skills, this one has no restrictions on weapon type. Crushing Fist becomes usable after blocking a hit, and the attack cannot be evaded. At level 20, it deals 2,193% of weapon damage, which is insane, and it has a 2.8 meter base radius as well. But it does have a very heavy penalty for ailment damage at 60% less. And it's been confirmed in the Q&A that retaliation skills cannot be exerted. However, nothing was said about Fist of War, so that support should work on this one. Next is Eviscerate, which has already changed since the initial gem we saw back at the reveal. This one requires you to be wielding a sword or axe in the main hand and a shield in the offhand. Once again, this skill becomes usable after blocking a hit, and it cannot be evaded. Eviscerate deals 1,345% of weapon damage at level 20, but interestingly, this gem previously had a less damage with ailments modifier when it was originally shown off at the time of the reveal, but this stat is now gone, so it's quite powerful for bleeding or ignite, especially since it doesn't even need any bleed chance as the attack always inflicts bleeding by default. Eviscerate's mechanics are somewhat similar to Shield Crush, in that it deals 2 hits of damage which can overlap, which can hit a target twice, in which case you'd be dealing a whopping 2,690% weapon damage combined in both hits. Eviscerate also hits a huge area with a base width in front of the character of 3.2 meters and a length from the character outwards of 10 meters. Next is Swordstorm, which requires the character to be dual wielding. This one rains down a series of blades, hitting an area 8 times with overlapping damage for 247% of weapon damage in each blade, for a total of 1,976% weapon damage. Like the others, this attack also cannot be evaded, but the really powerful part of this ability is that the damage dealt is the combined weapon damage of both weapons into each hit, so with the right setup, that's going to be a ton of burst damage. The last melee retaliation skill is Glacial Shield Swipe, which just has some of the most ridiculous flat damage scaling. With the quality change, a good armor and evasion shield will be breaching 3,000 total combined armor and evasion, which, on a level 20 gem, would put this ability at around 8,000 base physical damage, 100% of which is converted to cold, and then the ability always freezes and cannot be evaded. That is absolutely insane levels of damage, but do take note of the 50% less damage with ailment stat. This skill requires a shield to use, of course, and it becomes usable on blocking a hit. And this skill also just has an 8 meter base radius. This one might be the most broken out of all of them. The numbers here are just ridiculous, and this is going to be really strong with Emperor's Vigilance and Seething Fury as well. Then we have the only spell retaliation skill, Divine Retribution. We saw this one in the trailer a little bit, but its mechanics are a bit more difficult to work out until we actually get into game and test it. But it seems like the spell will have some overlapping areas where it's able to hit a target multiple times. Whether it's right in the middle for 4 overlaps or perhaps the waves cannot overlap but the bursts do, we're not sure just yet. It requires a blocked hit to become usable and deals base physical damage, of which half is converted to lightning. This one has a notably high cooldown of 5 seconds. The final retaliation skill is Vengeful Cry, which is a war cry themed around rage. This one requires you to take a savage hit to become usable, which is any hit that a character takes that deals at least 15% of their maximum life as damage, and it must be dealt to life as well, so any damage absorbed by ward or energy shield wouldn't count towards that 15%. This can be any enemy hit that deals 15% of life as damage, but it should also work for any self-damage such as trauma support or the Echoes of Creation helmet, for example. We'll need to test those out in game to see if that works, but nothing in the wording of the skill would imply that it won't work. Vengeful Cry provides a buff which is very powerful. It regenerates 3 rage per second per 5 Warcry power, up to a maximum of 25 power. It also grants plus 25 maximum rage at level 20, and prevents the inherent loss of rage. To be clear, this won't prevent rage drain from things like Berserk or Rage Vortex of Berserking, but it will stop rage from dropping off naturally. GGG are also adding in a new support gem for these skills, Expert Retaliation, which makes Retaliate skills become usable for a bit longer, but it also applies a huge amount of more cooldown recovery rate. This one could be quite useful in some situations, which we'll discuss a little bit later on. Now, just like a bunch of the other mechanics changing in this patch, like Rage or Banners, Retaliation skills is another mechanic which is receiving a huge amount of support on the passive skill tree in the form of 5 new Retaliation Mastery wheels. The wheels include stats such as increased area of effect for Retaliation skills, melee hits with Retaliation skills Fortify, gain rage on hit with the Retaliation skills, and even ways to guarantee critical strikes using these skills. But the one passive skill tree that I want to focus on in this video is Prepared Response, which is located right next to the Crimson Dance keystone near the Duelist start. This is going to be the really important node for builds which want to focus in on using Retaliation skills. The Prepared Response wheel has 27% increased cooldown recovery rate of Retaliation skills split across 2 small nodes, while the other 2 small nodes on this wheel make these skills usable for longer. But the notable itself has a very special stat. 25% chance when you use a Retaliation skill for a different Retaliation skill to become usable. Now, what this means is that if you have at least 2 Retaliation skills in your build, when you meet the condition to use one of these, 25% of the time on using it, it will allow the other one to become usable, completely bypassing the required condition to use that skill. For example, in a build using Eviscerate and Vengeful Cry, you can block a hit, at which point Eviscerate becomes usable. Then, if you roll the 25% chance upon using Eviscerate, Vengeful Cry will become usable without the need for you to take a savage hit. Now, this is where things get quite fun, because you can find a further 10% of the same stat on the Retaliation Mastery for a total of 35% chance. But this stat becomes a lot more relevant with the Gladiator's new Ascendancy notable, Measured Retaliation. This notable adds an additional 2 seconds usable duration, doubling the base usable duration up to 4 seconds. It also provides 50% chance for used Retaliation skills to remain usable and not consume a cooldown use. So 50% of the time when you use a Retaliation skill, it will immediately be usable again, it won't go on cooldown. And there's more of this stat available as well from a new Anoint-only notable passive skill, No Forgiveness, which provides a further 20% of the same modifier. So with these combined, you'll have 70% chance for Retaliation skills to be usable again when you use them, and every time you use them, you roll that 35% chance for a different Retaliation skill to become usable. So in theory, you can have a setup where you're able to spam Retaliation skills in a way. And when you miss that 70% roll, you'll have another skill ready to go, and then you're able to use that and you can kind of ping-pong between them. So let's take a look at an example setup for a Gladiator with Measured Retaliation and the No Forgiveness notable anointed, with Prepared Response and the Mastery taken on the tree. Let's say you're using an axe and a shield, and you have an Eviscerate main damage link. You then have a secondary Retaliation link consisting of Crushing Fist, Glacial Shield Swipe, and Vengeful Cry, all linked to Expert Retaliation. You block a hit, and all of your skills except for Vengeful Cry become usable. You can then use Eviscerate to deal damage, until you roll the 30% chance that the skill will go on cooldown. Every time you use Eviscerate, there's a 35% chance for a different Retaliate skill to become usable. We don't know yet if this stat can pick skills which are already usable, but if it does, it should refresh the usable duration. When Eviscerate goes on cooldown, you start to use your other retaliation skills, ideally beginning with Vengeful Cry if it's available, as that's the most useful in terms of the three for the benefit it provides. You then use these skills until they proc Eviscerate to become usable again, or until you block again. By doing this, you should be able to chain retaliation skills together quite effectively, which, depending on how rewarding it feels to use these retaliation skills, could end up being quite a fun playstyle. Alright, at the end of this video I'll do a bit of a quick fire for things that I think are important to mention but don't need a whole lot of explanation, and most of them, actually all of them, are Retaliation Masteries because they're all really, really good. There's a mastery for 80% increased duration of ailments inflicted by retaliation skills, which is incredible for Eviscerate Bleed, but it's also good for Ignite. Another mastery, retaliation skills debilitate for 3 seconds on hit. This one's really powerful. Usually debilitate debuffs only last a second at a time and they're hard to maintain, but in a retaliation build setup you may be able to keep this debuff up permanently on targets, and it makes them deal 10% less damage and have 20% less movement speed. There's also a mastery for 40% reduced cost of retaliation skills to help you keep mana costs in check, and another mastery for 20% increased armor per different retaliation skill used in the past 10 seconds, which in a build like the one discussed earlier is going to be anywhere between 40% and 80% increased armor for a single point. And that's it. Retaliation skills in 3.25. Personally, I love the look of these. They look really fun. They're not going to be for everyone in terms of playstyle, but at the very least they are far more interesting than the old counterattacks were, that's for sure. Thanks for watching this video, and thank you for your ongoing support. As always, stay tuned and stay safe.